Leonora Vortex had spent her life in pursuit of the unknown. From the sprawling nebulae of the outer galaxies to the forgotten ruins on distant moons, she was relentless. But nothing could have prepared her for this, a world that defied every chart and sensor, hidden deep within a remote quadrant of space. Her ship had landed in a dense, humid jungle, and now she stood at the edge of a vast waterfall, its roaring waters cascading into a turquoise pool below. But it wasn't the beauty of the scene that captivated her. It was the pull. There was something here, something ancient. She could feel it like a whisper threading its way into her thoughts, beckoning her closer. Without realizing, her hands trembled as she reached for the clasp of her boots, pulling them off and letting her bare feet sink into the cold, wet rocks at the water's edge. She inhaled deeply, the scent of moss and water filling her lungs. The sound of the waterfall grew louder, almost deafening, but underneath it, a pulse. A heartbeat. For a moment, Leonora hesitated. She was an explorer, a woman of science. There was no logic in what she was feeling, no explanation for the pull this place had on her. Yet, she couldn't resist. Her heart raced as she stepped into the water, wading deeper until it reached her knees, the cool liquid sending chills up her spine. And then, she saw it, something beneath the surface, a massive shape, moving with grace and power. Her breath caught in her throat as the figure rose from the depths, breaking through the water in one smooth, deliberate motion. The creature was breathtaking. A being unlike anything she had ever seen, its body shimmering with iridescent scales that reflected the dim light of the jungle. Its shape was equine, but otherworldly, muscular and sleek, yet its eyes held a depth that spoke of ancient wisdom, and perhaps even more. They locked onto hers, and for a moment, the entire world around her seemed to still. Kelpharion, the guardian of the forgotten waters. His eyes, a luminous blue, seemed to glow as he approached, the water rippling around him as if the very elements bowed to his presence. Leonora couldn't move, her body frozen in place, caught between fear and awe. Suddenly, his voice pierced the silence, not spoken aloud, but a deep, resonant echo within her mind. Asterisk, you heard the call, outsider. Asterisk. Leonora gasped, startled by the voice, but more by the intimacy of it. It felt as though it came from inside her, vibrating through her very soul. She tried to compose herself, her instincts telling her to run, but her curiosity, her insatiable need to uncover the unknown, held her in place. Asterisk, who? What are you? Asterisk, she managed to ask, her voice shaking slightly. The creature tilted his head, his sapphire eyes narrowing as though weighing her words. The air around them thickened, charged with an unspoken energy. He moved closer, and as he did, she could feel the warmth of his presence, as if the cold water no longer existed between them. Asterisk, I am Kelpharion, guardian of these waters, and more. Asterisk, his voice was smooth, deep, almost seductive, a promise of things hidden just beyond her reach. Asterisk, what do you want from me? Asterisk, Leonora's pulse quickened, every instinct screaming at her that she was treading dangerous waters, but she couldn't look away. Kelpharion's lips curled into what might have been a smile, but there was a darkness in his eyes, an ancient hunger. Asterisk, it is not what I want from you, Leonora. It is what you want from me. Asterisk. The use of her name startled her, sending a jolt of adrenaline through her veins. She had never spoken it aloud. How could he know? She took a step back, her heart pounding harder in her chest. Asterisk, you came here seeking something. Power. Knowledge. Purpose. It does not matter. Whatever you desire, I can give it to you. But, asterisk, his voice deepened, reverberating within her. Asterisk, everything comes at a price. Asterisk. Leonora's mouth went dry. She had faced dangers before, but this felt different, more personal. She was an expert at unraveling mysteries, at outsmarting the universe's greatest puzzles. But now, standing before this enigmatic being, she realized that the greatest mystery wasn't the creature in front of her. It was herself. Asterisk, what price? Asterisk, she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Kelpharion's eyes glinted with an unreadable expression, and as he moved closer, the water parted gently around him, obedient to his presence. Asterisk, the price of your heart, and your freedom. Asterisk. His words wrapped around her like a soft, suffocating blanket, leaving her breathless. Leonora stood there, frozen, the gravity of his statement sinking in. She should have turned back. She should have run. But she didn't. Something deep within her stirred, an emotion she hadn't felt in years. Curiosity. Desire. She wasn't sure anymore. Whatever it was too late to turn away now. Leonora stood frozen, the weight of Kelpharion's words pressing down on her like a heavy fog. The price of your heart, and your freedom. She had been in dangerous situations before, but this felt different. It wasn't just her life at stake, it was something deeper, something that touched the very core of who she was. The creature before her, this majestic, otherworldly being, seemed to sense her hesitation. His eyes, glowing with a strange, ancient wisdom, bore into hers. For a moment, neither of them moved. The waterfall roared behind them, but its sound was distant, as if the world itself had paused, waiting for her next move. Leonora's pulse raced, her mind battling between logic and instinct. The logical part of her screamed to retreat, to escape while she still could. But the other part, the part that had always driven her to explore the unknown, kept her rooted in place. Kelpharion had spoken to something inside her, a deep, unfulfilled need she hadn't realized was there until now. What is it you want from me? She asked, her voice softer now, barely audible over the rushing waters. Kelpharion stepped closer, the water rippling around his powerful legs as he approached. His presence was overwhelming, filling the air with a mixture of raw energy and quiet power. He was a creature of legend, yet here he stood, real and tangible, offering something she couldn't yet understand. It is not what I want, Leonora. It is what you have come seeking, he replied, his deep voice reverberating through her mind like an echo in a cave. You feel it, don't you? The void inside. The endless questions. You search for meaning, for power, for purpose. And I, he paused, his sapphire eyes narrowing, I can give you all of that. Leonora swallowed hard. Her entire life had been spent in pursuit of answers. She had always been driven by the unknown, by the thrill of discovery. And yet, no matter how many ruins she explored or how many secrets she uncovered, she had never felt truly whole. There was always something missing, something just out of reach. She felt it now, stronger than ever, the pull toward this mysterious being. What are you offering me? She whispered, her curiosity overtaking her fear. Kelpharion's lips curled into a dark smile, but it was not a smile of malice. It was one of understanding, of knowing more than she could ever comprehend. Power beyond your imagination. Knowledge that transcends the stars. Purpose that will fill the emptiness inside you. He moved even closer, so close that Leonora could feel the heat radiating from his body. The mist from the waterfall clung to her skin, mixing with the warmth of his presence, creating a charged atmosphere between them. But, he continued, his voice lowering to a near growl, to receive all of this, you must surrender something in return. Leonora's chest tightened. Her breath came in shallow bursts as her mind raced to process his words. Surrender. She had never surrendered anything to anyone. She had fought for every inch of ground she had gained, never backing down, never giving in. But this was different. And what is that? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kelpharion's eyes gleamed as he reached out, his hand, or what resembled a hand, hovering just above her chest. She could feel the energy radiating from him, pulling at her, calling to her in ways she couldn't explain. Your heart, he said softly. And your freedom. Leonora's breath caught in her throat. The words hung between them, heavy and unyielding. Her heart. Her freedom. What did that even mean? And yet, deep down, she knew exactly what he was asking for. It wasn't just a physical bond he wanted. It was something much deeper, much more intimate. If you want to know the truth, if you want to understand the power of the forgotten waters, you must give yourself to me. His words sent a shiver down her spine, but not from fear. There was something seductive in the way he spoke, something that tugged at the very fabric of her being. He wasn't just offering her power, he was offering her a way to fill the void inside her, to become something more than she ever thought possible. But at what cost? Leonora stepped back, the cold water swirling around her legs as she tried to clear her mind. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to escape whatever this was before it consumed her. But she couldn't. She was tethered to this place, to him, by something she didn't fully understand. "I don't belong to anyone," she said, her voice steady, though her heart raced. Kelpharion's expression softened, though his eyes remained intense. Neither do I. But we are bound, you and I. Two souls searching for something they cannot name. His words struck a chord deep within her, resonating with something she had long buried. She had spent her entire life searching, but for what? Answers. Power. Or something more. Something she couldn't even name? The space between them seemed to shrink, the tension thickening as Kelpharion watched her intently, waiting. He wasn't pushing her, wasn't forcing her to choose, but the choice was there, hanging in the air between them, undeniable. What happens if I refuse? Leonora asked, her voice quieter now, more vulnerable than she intended. Kelpharion didn't move, didn't blink. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. You will leave here with nothing. No answers, no purpose. The void inside you will remain, consuming you piece by piece until there is nothing left. His words hit her like a physical blow, and she felt herself stagger slightly. Was that really the price of walking away? To remain empty, unfulfilled, forever chasing a goal she would never reach? And if I accept? She asked, her voice barely a whisper now. Kelpharion's gaze softened, and for the first time, she saw something like vulnerability in his eyes. Then you will know what it means to be whole. Leonora's heart pounded in her chest, the weight of his words pressing down on her. To be whole. To feel complete, to understand the mysteries of the universe, to fill the emptiness that had haunted her for so long. It was everything she had ever wanted. But at what cost? The choice was hers. And as she stood there, staring into the depths of Kelpharion's glowing eyes, she realized that no matter what she chose, her life would never be the same again. The night had settled in, casting a dim light over the jungle. The waterfall still roared in the distance, but now it seemed more like a distant hum, blending with the pulse that Leonora felt coursing through her veins. She stood at the water's edge, staring into the shimmering pool, her thoughts a swirling tempest. Kelpharion had disappeared beneath the surface hours ago, leaving her alone with a decision that weighed heavy on her mind. She hadn't left. She couldn't. Every time she thought about walking away, something inside her pulled her back, an invisible tether binding her to this place, to him. Your heart. Your freedom. The words haunted her, repeating over and over in her mind. What was she even considering? How could she give herself over to a creature, to something so unknown, so dangerous? Yet, the emptiness she had always felt, the endless questions that plagued her every waking moment, they tugged at her, demanding she stay. Leonora's breath was shallow, her skin damp with the humid night air. She stared at her reflection in the water, but the woman looking back at her seemed like a stranger. There was something different in her eyes, a change she couldn't yet name. Suddenly, the water rippled. She stepped back, heart pounding as Kelpharion emerged from the depths once again. His form glistened under the pale moonlight, his scales reflecting the soft glow. His eyes locked onto hers, and she felt that same pull, stronger now, more consuming. The air around them felt thick, electric, like the world itself was holding its breath. He moved closer, his massive body gliding effortlessly through the water. When he spoke, his voice was softer this time, yet still carried that deep resonance that echoed inside her mind. Have you made your choice? Leonora's throat tightened. The words were caught somewhere between fear and anticipation. She had thought about nothing else since he'd left, replaying his offer again and again. It terrified her, but it also thrilled her in a way she couldn't explain. What if he was right? What if this was the answer she had been searching for her entire life? But there was still something she didn't understand, something she needed to know before she could take the next step. What does it mean, she asked, her voice barely a whisper. To give you my heart, my freedom? Kelpharion's eyes narrowed slightly, his gaze intense but not harsh. He swam closer, his powerful body cutting through the water until he was almost within reach. It means surrender, Leonora. It means binding your soul to mine, becoming part of something far greater than yourself. It means no longer being alone in the universe, but also never being truly free again. Leonora's breath hitched. Binding her soul to his. The thought sent a ripple of both fear and longing through her. She had spent her entire life alone, even in the company of others. No one had ever understood the depth of her yearning, the unspoken void inside her that nothing had ever filled. And yet, here was this creature, this being, offering her something she had never dared to ask for. A connection. A bond that transcended space and time. But the cost. "And what happens if I walk away?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Kelpharion's gaze darkened, his eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. "You will walk away with nothing. The questions will remain unanswered. The void inside you will continue to grow. And the bond that has already begun between us will remain incomplete." The finality of his words struck her like a blow. Incomplete. Was that what she had always been? Was that why she felt this gnawing emptiness no matter where she went or what she discovered? The realization hit her like a wave, drowning out her doubts, pulling her under. She swallowed hard, her heart racing as she took a step forward, toward the water. Toward him. "If I do this, there's no going back, is there?" she asked, her voice a mere whisper now, as if speaking too loudly would shatter the fragile resolve she was building. Kelpharion shook his head slowly, his glowing eyes never leaving hers. "No. Once the bond is made, it cannot be undone." Leonora's heart pounded in her chest. She knew what she was about to do, and yet there was a part of her that still hesitated. But not out of fear. The hesitation came from the knowledge that her life was about to change forever. This wasn't just a decision. It was a transformation. Taking a deep breath, she steeled herself. She had come this far. There was no turning back now. Slowly, deliberately, she reached into her pack and pulled out the small blade she always carried with her, a relic from one of her many adventures. The metal glinted in the moonlight as she held it in her trembling hand. Kelpharion's eyes followed her movements, his expression unreadable. "You understand what you're doing?" he asked, his voice softer now, almost concerned. Leonora nodded. She wasn't sure if she truly understood, but she knew it was the only way. She couldn't walk away. Not now. Not ever. Without another word, she turned the blade toward her palm, her heart racing as she pressed the edge against her skin. The cut was shallow, but deep enough to draw blood. She winced slightly, watching as the crimson liquid pooled in her palm. For a moment, she hesitated, staring at the blood, the reality of her choice sinking in. "Let the waters take it," Kelpharion's voice urged gently, his eyes fixed on her hand. With trembling fingers, Leonora extended her arm over the water. The first drop of blood fell, disappearing into the pool with a soft ripple. Another drop. Then another. The water below her began to glow faintly, as if it were responding to her offering. Kelpharion's eyes flared with an intense light as he watched the blood mix with the water. He moved closer, his presence now looming over her, and as the final drop of blood fell, he reached out and touched her wrist. Leonora gasped as a surge of energy shot through her. It wasn't pain, but it was overwhelming, like her body was being flooded with a force she had never felt before. The water beneath her feet shimmered, glowing brighter with each passing second, until it seemed like the entire pool was alive with light. Kelpharion's touch was firm, but there was a gentleness in the way his hand held hers. His eyes, still glowing, met hers, and for the first time, she felt a connection, a bond that went beyond the physical, something deeper, more profound. "It is done," he whispered, his voice reverberating inside her mind. "We are bound, Leonora. You are no longer alone." Leonora's breath came in short gasps, her body trembling from the intensity of the moment. She had done it. She had given herself over to him, to the bond, to whatever future awaited her now. But as she looked into Kelpharion's eyes, she realized something she hadn't expected. It wasn't fear she felt. It wasn't even regret. It was peace. For the first time in her life, the void inside her felt full. But the peace wouldn't last. The world around Leonora had changed in a way she couldn't fully comprehend. The moment her blood mixed with the waters, something shifted deep within her. She felt it immediately, a connection, not just to Kelpharion, but to the water itself, as if she had become a part of the living force that surged beneath the surface. The air was thicker, the sounds more vibrant, and her senses heightened beyond what they had ever been. Every breath she took felt as though it was shared, not only by her lungs, but by the very waters around her. Kelpharion watched her closely, his glowing eyes filled with a mixture of satisfaction and something else, something darker, something she couldn't name. His presence in her mind was now constant, a whisper at the edge of her consciousness. No words, just presence, as if he was always there, watching, feeling, waiting. "You feel it, don't you?" his voice whispered inside her head. It was no longer startling, just familiar. The bond between them had begun to solidify. Leonora's pulse quickened as she looked at him. She had expected to feel fear, maybe even regret, after the ritual, but instead, there was a strange calm that enveloped her. A part of her had been filled, that gaping void inside her, the endless yearning that had driven her to explore the farthest reaches of the galaxy, felt momentarily at peace. But it wasn't just peace. It was power. Her body hummed with it, a low, simmering energy that surged through her veins, making her feel invincible. She had never felt anything like this before. Kelpharion had been right. The connection they shared was unlike anything she had ever experienced. But with that power came a weight. A new sensation, one that grew heavier the longer she stood there, her feet in the glowing waters. She felt tethered, as though invisible chains had wrapped around her, binding her to the pool, to Kelpharion. Every time she tried to step back, to distance herself from the water's edge, a sharp, aching pull dragged her back. Her hand instinctively flew to her chest, gripping the fabric of her shirt as her heart began to race. She looked up at Kelpharion, her eyes wide. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What's happening to me?" Kelpharion's expression softened, but there was no mistaking the gravity in his gaze. "You are feeling the bond, Leonora. You are now a part of this place. Part of me." The words hit her like a punch to the stomach. Part of him. She hadn't fully understood what that meant before, but now she could feel it. She wasn't just linked to him, she was bound to him, and to this place, in a way that went beyond simple connection. It was like her very soul had been tied to his. I didn't realize it would feel like this," she whispered, her hand still clutching her chest as if trying to ground herself. The power inside her was intoxicating, but the feeling of being anchored to something she couldn't escape from sent a wave of panic through her. Kelpharion stepped forward, his massive form moving with the grace of a predator, yet there was something gentle in his approach. "You asked for answers. For power. You came here searching for something, and now you have found it. But nothing comes without a price." Leonora's heart pounded in her chest, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She had known there would be a price, but she hadn't understood the full extent of it until now. She wasn't just bound to Kelpharion. She was trapped. Every time she tried to step away from the water, the ache in her chest intensified, pulling her back. "I can't leave, can I?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kelpharion's eyes softened with what looked like regret, but he didn't answer directly. Instead, he stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "You belong to me now, Leonora, just as I belong to you." The words sent a chill down her spine. They were supposed to comfort her, but instead, they filled her with a deep sense of dread. She had always prided herself on her independence, her ability to move through the galaxy freely, unbound by the constraints of others. But now she wasn't sure if she would ever be free again. "I never belonged to anyone," she said, her voice tinged with defiance. "I've always been on my own." Kelpharion tilted his head, his eyes gleaming with something that looked almost like sadness. "Neither have I. But now we are bound. Two souls, searching for what neither could find alone." Leonora's chest tightened. She wanted to scream, to run, but the invisible chains held her fast. She was tethered to him, to this place, and she didn't know how, or if, she could ever break free. The pull between them wasn't just emotional or mental, it was physical. She could feel it now, a force deep within her that kept her anchored to him, drawing her closer every time she tried to pull away. It was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. "What if I don't want this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if I want to leave?" Kelpharion's gaze darkened, and for the first time, there was something dangerous in his eyes. "You cannot leave, Leonora. The bond has been forged. It cannot be undone." His words hit her like a punch to the gut, and for the first time since meeting him, real fear coursed through her veins. She had always been in control, always known what she wanted and how to get it. But now, that control was slipping away, and the realization was suffocating. "You promised me answers. You promised me power." Her voice shook with the weight of her rising panic. "But you didn't tell me it would come at the cost of my freedom." Kelpharion's expression softened, but the intensity in his gaze remained. "Freedom is an illusion, Leonora. You have always been bound by something. Your past, your desires, your need for answers. All I have done is make you aware of the chains that already existed." The words struck deep, and Leonora found herself at a loss. He was right, in a way. She had always been searching, always driven by the emptiness inside her. But now that she had found something, now that she had felt the power that came with the bond, she wasn't sure she could walk away, even if she had the choice. The silence between them stretched on, thick and suffocating. Leonora stared into the glowing waters, her mind spinning with thoughts of what she had given up, of what she had gained, and of the invisible chains that now held her. Kelpharion moved closer, his presence towering over her, but his voice was soft, almost tender. "You asked for purpose. You sought power. And now you have it. But power comes with a price, Leonora. Always." She looked up at him, her breath shallow, her chest tight. The power inside her was real. She could feel it coursing through her veins, filling her with a strength she had never known. But at what cost? Her voice was barely a whisper as she asked the question that haunted her. "What happens now?" Kelpharion's eyes glowed softly in the dim light of the jungle, his gaze unwavering. "Now, we discover what it truly means to be bound." The nights had grown darker since the bond had been sealed. Leonora's sleep, once a quiet respite from the demands of her travels, was now haunted by vivid, unsettling dreams. She found herself floating in endless waters, being pulled deeper into their dark embrace, while shadows coiled around her like unseen hands. Kelpharion's voice was always there, whispering in the darkness, a constant presence in her mind, even when she slept. But it wasn't just his voice that haunted her dreams, it was the sense of something lurking beneath the surface. A shadow, a darkness that she couldn't quite see but could always feel. It was growing stronger, more insistent, as if it were waiting for her to acknowledge it. Tonight was no different. Leonora found herself submerged in those familiar dark waters once again, the cold pressing in on her skin. She could hear her heartbeat echoing in her ears, faster, louder, as the shadows swirled around her. The pull was stronger than ever, dragging her deeper, until the water was no longer clear, but black and impenetrable. "Kelpharion," she called out in her dream, her voice lost in the abyss. But there was no answer. And then she saw it, a flicker of movement beneath her, a massive, hulking shape, shifting through the darkness. Her breath caught in her throat as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. The creature was like nothing she had ever encountered, a twisted version of Kelpharion's majestic form, but darker, more monstrous. It surged upward, breaking through the water with a force that sent waves crashing around her. Leonora's heart raced as she tried to swim away, but the water was thick, viscous, as though it had become part of the shadow itself. She was trapped, unable to move, as the creature loomed closer, its eyes glowing with an eerie, unnatural light. And then, she heard his voice. "You have seen the truth." Leonora jolted awake, gasping for air as if she had been drowning. She sat upright in her makeshift bed, her skin slick with sweat, her heart pounding in her chest. The jungle was quiet around her, the only sound the distant rush of the waterfall. But the dream lingered, vivid and real, as though it had left a mark on her very soul. She ran a hand through her damp hair, trying to calm her racing mind. It wasn't just a dream. She knew it wasn't. Something was wrong, something deeper than the bond she had forged with Kelpharion. The shadow in her dreams wasn't just a figment of her imagination. It was real, and it was growing. As her breathing slowed, Leonora felt the familiar presence of Kelpharion in her mind, though this time it was different. It was heavier, darker. The bond between them felt strained, as though something was shifting, pulling them apart even as it tied them closer together. "What was that?" she asked aloud, her voice trembling slightly. Kelpharion's voice was slow to answer, his tone low and quiet in her thoughts. "You are seeing what I am. What I have always been." Leonora's pulse quickened as she stood, her legs unsteady beneath her. She made her way toward the water, her mind spinning with questions. She could feel him, deeper now, like a part of her very being, and yet, there was a darkness she hadn't felt before. It wasn't just the bond that connected them, there was something else, something darker, lurking beneath the surface of their connection. "What do you mean?" she asked, stepping closer to the glowing waters, her reflection barely visible in the pale light. "What are you hiding from me?" For a moment, there was silence. Then, Kelpharion's form began to rise from the water, emerging with the same grace and power as always, but this time there was a heaviness in his presence. His glowing eyes, once filled with wisdom and calm, now gleamed with a shadow she hadn't seen before. "You have seen the truth," he said, his voice deeper, almost mournful. "You know now what I truly am." Leonora shook her head, her heart pounding in her chest. She had seen something in her dreams, yes, but she didn't understand. She didn't want to understand. The creature in her dream, the darkness that had surrounded her, that couldn't be him. It couldn't. "No," she whispered, taking a step back. "That wasn't you. It was something else." Kelpharion stood before her, his massive form casting a long shadow over the water. His sapphire eyes still gleamed, but now she saw something she hadn't noticed before, a flicker of desperation. Despite his power, despite the bond they shared, he wasn't invulnerable. He wasn't above fear. And that fear was tied to her. "You don't understand, do you?" she whispered, her voice barely carrying in the thick, humid air. "You don't understand what you're asking of me." Kelpharion lowered his gaze, the water rippling softly around his legs as he took a step closer. His presence was still overwhelming, but now there was a vulnerability in the way he moved, the way he looked at her. "I understand more than you think," he said, his voice deep, almost mournful. "You feel trapped, as though this bond has taken something from you. But you must know, Leonora, I never wanted to trap you. I wanted to give you what you sought." Leonora's breath hitched as his words sank in. He was right. She had felt trapped from the moment the bond was sealed. The power she had gained was intoxicating, yes, but it came with invisible chains, ones that bound her not only to him but to the darkness he carried. "You never told me what you really were," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You hid the truth from me, and now you expect me to just accept it?" Kelpharion's eyes darkened, his expression pained. "I feared that if you knew, you would turn away. You would run. And if you did—" He trailed off, his gaze flickering with uncertainty. Leonora's heart ached at the sight of him, at the struggle she could see playing out in his mind. He had wanted her to stay, to forge the bond that would give them both what they needed. But now, she wasn't sure if that bond had been forged out of trust or out of fear. "You should have given me the choice," she whispered, her voice breaking. Kelpharion's eyes met hers, filled with regret. "I know." The silence that followed was suffocating. The jungle around them seemed to hold its breath, as though the world itself was waiting for her to make the decision that would change everything. She had two paths before her, and neither one was easy. If she stayed, if she accepted the darkness that came with the bond, she would have power beyond anything she had ever imagined. She would be part of something larger than herself, a force tied to the very heart of this planet. But she would never be free. She would belong to Kelpharion, and to the shadows that lived within him. And deep down, she knew that part of her would always be lost to that darkness. But if she walked away, if she tried to break the bond, what would become of her? What would become of him? "What happens if I leave?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kelpharion didn't move. His eyes darkened, and for a moment she saw the shadow flicker in them again, the darkness that had first frightened her in her dreams. "If you break the bond, we will both suffer," he said quietly. "The power we share will unravel, and the shadows that dwell within me will be set free. I will lose myself, and you will be consumed by the void." Leonora's heart pounded in her chest. The void. She had felt it her entire life, that gnawing emptiness, the constant sense that something was missing. It was what had driven her to explore the farthest reaches of the galaxy, to search for answers in places others dared not go. She had thought that the bond with Kelpharion had filled that void, at least in part. But now, she wasn't sure if it had filled it, or simply replaced it with something else. The stakes were higher than she had realized. It wasn't just her own life that was at risk. If she broke the bond, Kelpharion would lose control of the darkness within him. He would be lost to it, consumed by the shadow. And she would be left with nothing. "I don't know if I can live with this," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I don't know if I can live with this darkness." Kelpharion stepped forward, his glowing eyes softening as he reached out, his hand hovering just above her shoulder. His touch was gentle, but it sent a wave of energy through her, a reminder of the bond that connected them, that tied them together in ways she couldn't fully comprehend. "You are stronger than you know, Leonora," he said softly. "The darkness is part of me, yes. But it does not define me. And it does not have to define you." His words hit her hard. She had always seen the world in black and white, in light and darkness. But Kelpharion was showing her something different, a world where the two coexisted, where power and purpose came with both light and shadow. It was a truth she hadn't wanted to see, but now she couldn't deny it. Leonora looked up at him, her heart heavy with the weight of the choice she had to make. She could feel the bond between them, pulsing with life, with energy. It was a part of her now, a part of who she was. But the question remained, was she willing to accept the darkness that came with it? "If I stay, what happens to me?" she asked, her voice quiet. Kelpharion's eyes glowed softly as he looked down at her. "You will become what you were always meant to be." Leonora's breath caught in her throat. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. What she was always meant to be. She had spent her entire life searching for that answer, for the missing piece that would make her whole. And now, standing on the precipice of the greatest decision she would ever make, she realized that the answer had been in front of her all along. The void inside her had been filled, not by the power Kelpharion had offered, but by the connection they shared, a connection forged in both light and shadow. She wasn't just bound to him. She was part of him, just as he was part of her. Leonora closed her eyes, her heart racing as the choice became clear. "I'll stay," she whispered, her voice trembling with the weight of her decision. "But on my terms." Kelpharion's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. But then, slowly, he nodded, his expression softening with understanding. "On your terms," he repeated, his voice gentle. Leonora felt a strange sense of peace wash over her, even as the weight of her choice settled on her shoulders. She had chosen to stay, to accept the bond and the darkness that came with it. But she would not be a prisoner to it. She would make her own path, find her own way forward. Kelpharion stepped closer, his presence filling the space around them, and for the first time, she didn't feel fear. She didn't feel trapped. She felt whole. "We will discover our path together," he said softly, his voice carrying a promise that echoed deep within her. Leonora nodded, her heart steady now, her resolve stronger than ever. The choice had been made. Now, they would face whatever came next, together. The dawn cast its first light over the jungle, golden rays cutting through the thick mist that lingered above the water. Leonora stood by the edge of the pool, her heart steady, her resolve unshaken. She felt Kelpharion beside her, his presence as familiar now as her own heartbeat. They had chosen each other, bound by a promise, forged in both light and shadow. The void inside her had quieted, replaced by the constant hum of energy that pulsed through her veins. She was complete, in a way she had never thought possible. But she knew this peace wouldn't last. Kelpharion turned to her, his sapphire eyes reflecting the morning light, casting strange, shimmering shadows across the water's surface. He had become part of her, and she of him. They shared more than a bond now. They shared purpose, a connection that went beyond the physical, touching something deeper, more primal. "The bond has changed you," he said softly, his voice like a distant echo in her mind. "You carry part of me within you now, just as I carry a part of you." Leonora felt the truth of his words. She could feel his presence within her, a steady warmth that mingled with the darkness she had chosen to embrace. But with that warmth came something else, a memory, a warning. She had accepted him, but she was still learning the weight of what it meant. "And what now?" she asked, looking up at him, her gaze steady. Kelpharion's expression softened, a mixture of pride and sorrow in his eyes. "Now, we protect this place, together. The shadows that reside within me, they can no longer be contained by the waters alone. We are their guardians now." Leonora's breath caught. She hadn't realized the full extent of what she was agreeing to, hadn't understood that the bond wasn't just about power and purpose. It was a responsibility, one that would tether her to this place, to this creature, for as long as she lived. The waters rippled softly, as if in response to their shared realization. She could feel it now, the pulse of the shadows that lay beneath the surface, waiting, watching. They were a part of her, just as they were a part of Kelpharion. She couldn't deny them. She couldn't escape them. "You mean, we're bound here?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Kelpharion nodded, his expression unreadable.
Yes.
We are bound to this place. The waters, the shadows, they are ours to protect. Leonora felt a strange peace settle over her, mingling with a bittersweet ache in her chest. She had spent her entire life searching for freedom, for the thrill of discovery and the rush of adventure. But now, she had found something different, something she hadn't known she was searching for, a place to belong. Kelpharion moved closer, his presence a comforting weight beside her. He reached out, his hand hovering just above her shoulder, as if he were afraid to break the fragile peace between them. "Are you at peace with this choice?" he asked, his voice filled with quiet uncertainty. Leonora looked up at him, her gaze unwavering. "Yes," she whispered, her voice steady.
I am.
They stood in silence, their bond a quiet, unspoken promise that echoed in the stillness around them. For the first time, she felt truly whole. She had found what she had been searching for, not in the endless stars, but here, in the shadows, in the waters, in the shared heartbeat that now pulsed between them. The sun rose higher, casting a warm glow over the jungle. Leonora felt the weight of her decision settle over her, but it wasn't a burden. It was a gift. She had chosen to stay, to protect, to become a part of something greater than herself. And in that choice, she had found freedom. She took a deep breath, her hand reaching out to touch the surface of the water. It rippled beneath her fingers, a quiet acknowledgment of the bond she had forged, the path she had chosen. She was no longer alone, no longer bound by the emptiness that had once haunted her. Kelpharion stood beside her, his presence a steady, comforting warmth in the cool morning air. Together, they would face whatever came next, protect the waters, and guard the shadows that lay beneath. They were bound, not by chains, but by choice. And for Leonora, that was enough.